All right, let's do this, and plan to get our first break by 10 to 8 so you can get carved up. First, I want to do a real quick refresher of what we learned last week, which is on the website as slides, podcast, and video. And if you actually click the play button, you'll get the audio. I won't do it right now, but you can do it that way. And it loads well on your mobile phone, or you can do the podcast or YouTube. But one thing you can take from the slides are 4 categories of anthropology, which I've put on the board. Just trying to tattoo those into your brain, no pun intended. Tattoo guys are missing today. Sociocultural anthropology, linguistics, archaeology, and biological physical anthropology. Those are 4 categories. You want to start thinking about those and what interests you most. I wrote them in that order because it just slab or slap was sticking out to me as some way you can remember those. Or if you go with cultural, then you can do clap as well. But you just pick one as you move forward and try to decide what your final project paper topic is. If you're an English major or something, if you love language, or if you are a international studies major, or sometimes maybe like international business or marketing, global studies. You might want to look at linguistics, or if you're a writer or something like that. If you're interested in history, mostly, maybe you want, history, you might want to look at archaeology. That's my least favorite, although I like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. If you're a medical pre-med student, or nursing student, or health sciences, you might want to look at biological and physical or anthropology. If you're like me and you like social stuff, you might want to choose to go socio-cultural route. And these are just our 4 categories of anthropology, as broad as we can get them, what we learned last week. So you want to start getting that footing and that foundation as we move forward. As I've indicated, every class is really important to come to and just kind of plow forward. And if you miss one, it's hard to go back and really make that up. It's all about the engagement. And I really like this 3-hour structure now, where it's going to be the slides, then you guys, and then a discussion. The discussion is really loose. I have a couple ideas for discussion tonight that I'm kind of excited about. But what's the guy who's not here today? He must be sick, so he'll get well soon. What's his name? Oh, it's 2 of them.
The one that were brothers?
Yeah. They're both gone. Nobody knows their name. Oh, I remember.
They're coming in right now.
Jay Streeter was one of them. I think Jay Streeter.
Yeah, it's some right there.
Yeah. Well, he did. I think it was him. Brought up the fact that I was on Rate the Professor. So you know me, I had to go home and check it out. As soon as class. In fact, maybe not even when class was over. I probably did it right here on my phone. And one of the knocks was that I came up with stuff they thought the day of class. And I thought about that and like, is that a bad thing to really live in the moment of today, or what's important today? What's going in today or this month or this year? What's super important right now are the presidential elections. And so obviously that will come to the top, rise to the top as something that's vital to our lives today. It's very current. So, obviously that student was wrong to knock me, obviously, first off. But second off, I mean, I'm going to keep living in today, and I hope that doesn't bother any of you. I actually did make the PowerPoint on Sunday, but if you want me to just go back to my last year's PowerPoints and kind of use those, I'll do that. It saved me a lot of time. I like to keep things fresh. So even to the fact where I was reading chapter 1 out in the hall just to get all fresh on it and stuff starts popping in my head. So I encourage you to do that. For those of you who are new to college, and I don't think many in this class are really new, but don't worry about reading all week and really stewing on this stuff. I'd encourage you to read the day after class, and then right before class, just so that when you get to class, you're just kind of geared up and ready to engage. So you don't have to worry about a ton of reading, just come, ready to engage, okay? So those are our 4 categories again, and the rest of the stuff is for the 3rd hour, and I don't want to steal any thunder away from our wonderful presenters in the 2nd hour. This is the slideshow, which I already posted on my website, so you can find it there as well. The title of the slideshow is Disorientation and Orientation. But, like I said, I'm not going to steal any of the thunder away from the 2nd hour presenters, because my slideshow is not about the book. You see that very quickly, I believe, in the first slide. How did I find the source for my presentation in my slides today? I got into the book, which I went online to Google Books and got it for free. And then I went to the very end of chapter 1. And at the end of each chapter is going to be a bibliography or a list of the sources for that chapter. So I'm trying to give you tips on how to read stuff too as we go along. This is an intro course. I'm going to teach you these tips that will help you later on in other classes. There's another knock against me. They said, get ready. They said, this is not an English course. I thought I was taking sociology as an English course. But you have to learn other skills and abilities than just sociology, I think, in this class. And that's my philosophy, so I'm just conveying all my philosophies in the first few weeks. I think writing is a real important skill. I work with people that can't form sentences, and it drives me insane, and it bugs the heck out of me. Granted, some of those people wind up being very successful, so whether or not that determines your success level in life, that's, to be debated in another class at another time. But I think it's really important to learn, and you can't get published, for example, as a sociologist unless you know how to write. I mean, it's just part of the deal. So I also want to teach you how to read, and instead of just going into a chapter and reading every word, you should skim it. And one of the first things you should do is just read the section headings and skip to the end and look at the source list. Your final project is going to require 6 sources. In fact, your midterm requires 6 sources. And so what you want to do right now is anytime something piques your interest and you get a little titillated about the subject matter, look to the back of the chapter and look at the list of sources. And you start doing what I call cherry picking. Just cherry pick sources. So the fact is you don't really have to get super good at searching the journal indexes. I mean, you do have to find them eventually, acquire them and look at them. But you don't have to be like this genius database indexing searcher. Just kind of go along and cherry pick sources. And when I got to the end of the chapter 1, I came across this one, Investigating Culture, an Experimental Introduction to Anthropology. Oh wait, that's the book, no. That's the book. That's how I picked the book too, the same way actually. And it's a good book. But that's not the article that I reviewed for this slideshow. But I went to the back of the book, and I went to the sources, and I picked Theory in Anthropology since the 60s, Comparative Studies in Society and History. And I thought that was cool because it's the 60s, and I like Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles, and 1968 Detroit Tigers, Major League Baseball world champions, et cetera, et cetera. In the 60s, kind of, I'm a little bit of a hippie at heart. I would probably have long hair if it was allowed in this American culture and acceptable in the business. I would probably have tie-dye or something, maybe some Birkenstocks. Oh, in fact, last year I wore suits with sandals and had some pictures taken, and my friend said I looked like a total buffoon because I had flip-flops on. So I've changed it up. In fact, I got new shoes this week. Fit more into the culture and the role that I'm supposed to play. I'm actually a product of my environment. I'm a tool in the system. So I'll be the first one to point that out. But the 60s, there was a lot of counterculture in the 60s, and I found that was a great decade for cool, kind of fun stuff. Although I might be idealizing it. You never know, I'll have to study it. So I found that one listed, and I said, okay, first thing I want to do is find out a little bit about the author. So all I did was Google Ortner Anthropology, and up comes Sherry Ortner. And oh, by the way, when I got to the article, she was listed as University of Michigan. So these sort of things just start clicking, and I'm like, this is where I should be. I should be at this article. I find a cool title, about a cool decade. I Google the author. I find the article. She's from University of Michigan. And then I read this on her bio at UCLA. And generally, people on the West Coast are pretty cool, too. So, in the early 90s, she switched her research to the United States. I like the United States. Her first project was on the meanings and workings of class in the United States. I put this in red, using her own high school graduating class as her ethnographic subject. And the reason why I highlighted that, even though we're not into the text yet that I was reading and studying, was because I think that this is a philosophy that I also support, and I try to convey to you that it's something that I used last year a lot. I would say the world is our laboratory, okay? We are not in a computer lab, we are not in a science lab or your medical skills lab. We're just in the world. Like this class is just in the world. The world is our laboratory. Our experiences here for this class or our experiments could be in a mall or a movie theater, on campus. They could be wherever you want, in your dorm room, in your apartment. You study your church, your own family history. You could do a dig if you wanted to, which would be weird, but I'd like to see that. Or you could study your own language or the language of your friends or roommates or various cultures. So I really want you to look at your own environment as a potential set of research subjects. And she did the same thing. I mean, this is what I strongly believe in. She used her own high school graduating class to write her first paper, which is not what this is about. But I thought that was really cool. Right now, my own research, I'm interviewing athletes in Flint and Lansing. So these are a lot of the guys I grew up with. In fact, I had some classes with some of the Flintstone basketball players from Michigan State University at that time. And now I'm getting to actually know these guys through interviews and studying them. And it's just so much fun for me because I just think that your lives should not suck. You need to do something that you really like to do. So just for this class, think about whatever you like to do the most, and we'll determine over these 16 weeks how to write a good final paper for it, and you'll be all set. So anthropology, another reason I chose to read this article is because it's at the very beginning of our semester. It's not too detailed. It's an overview. It gives a broad scope, spectrum of anthropology. So she's talking about, is it a unified discipline? Can anyone think of some unified disciplines in a university, in a college? The discipline of maybe nursing. It's rather unified. You have some specialties, pediatrics or geriatrics, but when you go into nursing, is it or is it not pretty much 90% at least of your classes are going to be the same? You just go through the nursing program. Or if you were to go through
criminal justice.
Yeah, it's all the same classes, right? You get to start to know some of your classmates. It's a very unified, group, and it's a unified discipline. You can't really go too far in criminal justice. That's a perfect one. And so she's asking this question: is anthropology a unified discipline? And she's claiming that we do not hear stirring arguments anymore. And it's a good way to start your paper is to say what's lacking. So she says, there's no stirring arguments in anthropology anymore, so here's a stirring argument. Like she's sort of creating the void and then trying to fill it. And that's a strategic way that a writer would say, and I always say this, like, if you want to talk about poverty and murder rates in Flint, like I've heard them all before, so don't say, there's no studies on murder rates in Flint. And here's a study. I'll say, yeah, there's tons of studies on murder rates and poverty in Flint. I've heard it all. So you have to come and say, there's no studies in Saginaw movie theaters or Bay City hospices or wherever you want to study. And then you say, so here's my study. Okay? So that's what she does. She's got a setup and delivery method that she pulls there. Although anthropology was never actually unified in the sense of adopting a single shared paradigm, like maybe criminal justice has a a single shared paradigm, there's at least a period when there are a few large categories of theoretical affiliation. Our large categories we learned in week 1, sociocultural, linguistics, archaeology, biophysical. And then paradigm. I think it's very important if you read a word that you're not too familiar with, and even paradigm, sometimes I forget exactly what it means. You got to look it up. And so I wrote for paradigm. I don't want to confuse any of you. When we read that, I want you to know that paradigm is a pattern or a model of something. It's simply a model. So a paradigm, a single shared paradigm is a single shared model. And through a criminal justice bachelor's program, that model would be class A, B, C, D, E. And that model would be, say, punitive, if that's the model of American justice system. I don't know because I'm not a criminologist, but that's what paradigm means. Okay, so if you need to argue something, you need to argue something, not just describe it. So back to that first point, she says there are no stirring arguments anymore in anthropology. Maybe she thinks that it's getting too descriptive. And as I stated in the first class, I don't want your final paper to be super descriptive. I don't want you to tell me a story. I want you to argue something. Not necessarily a moral or ethical argument, but just even arguing for the existence of something. So if you think there is a culture in the United States of, say, hip-hop, and you think it's being propagated somehow, I want you to sort of argue this is how hip-hop's being propagated through a black president or through the church or something like that. That's getting very sociocultural. So if you thought that was too sociological and you wanted to go linguistically, you could go maybe through rap music. You could do that, right? So you could go through the history of rap music and the progression.
So you don't want to start it up, but wouldn't you have to give background information?
There's definitely going to be background information, but your background information is not descriptive. Sticking to this argument idea, your background your question is going to be, is hip-hop propagating now more than ever? And then your background's not going to be, well, there was this rapper and that rapper and this rapper. Your background's going to be, this is when I think hip-hop was propagating and why and how and where. This is how it wasn't, and why and how and where. It's not so much a description of this was hip-hop. It was a support or a negation for your argument at that period in time, even though it is back in time. And also your literature review is going to be analyzing prior literature, not prior existence of hip-hop. It's going to be looking at other people's arguments. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, so remember that you're going to have to argue something, not just describe it. Learning how to skim read. So I throw a slide in like this because I think it's a skill that will really help you in this class and other classes. In the article that I was reading, I saw this. It just jumps out at me. You usually find this in the first sentence of a paragraph. And so she writes, that is what I propose to do in this article. What I propose to do in this article. After that, I'm expecting it to be very clear what she's going to propose to do in the article. And I did find that. The next sentence is, I will argue. And you just want to grab onto things like that. Just skip over all the other sort of BS in the whole article, filler. Just look for sentences like this. I will argue that. A new key symbol of theoretical orientation is emerging, which may be labeled practice, also action or practices. This is synonyms. So that was a great sentence too, because it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about. Today we're talking about orientation and disorientation, which will be explained and defined, I think, in the second hour, I'm assuming. But she's arguing a new key symbol of that orientation is emerging. Not just the descriptive anymore, but now it's the practice of anthropology. So if this were a history class, you might just give a description of what happened. But now we're actually practicing, and we're doing anthropology, or we're doing sociology. And hopefully, if you read the first chapter, you really got that feeling and that sense, because the first couple pages are this author just talking about, as an instructor, I'm not here just to state some facts that you have to memorize, because That used to happen in the 50s when we didn't have the internet. Now you can just go on the internet, you get your facts, you can memorize whatever you want. So you have access to information. So the idea in college and the university now is to synthesize these facts and to really apply them. And so she's arguing that we're moving towards a practice of anthropology, or for all social sciences, really. Again, we're not just reciting what we've learned, but in this class we're going to do something, and remembering that we're going to do something here in the laboratory, which is this campus, or wherever we choose it to be. So now I know exactly what the entire article is going to be about, right there. That's all I need to know. I can stop reading right there. 3 things to distinguish. I think in a sentence that came very close to after that. This is neither a theory nor a method, but rather it's a symbol. So we need to talk just a little bit about that. What are these 3 things? I mean, this is the second week. We need to make that as clear as possible. How are they different and how are they similar? If anyone has had an intro to social class before, or another anthropology class, or a psychology class, can you tell me a little bit about, you can pick either one of those 3 colored words, theory, method, symbols. Can anyone tell me a little bit about at least one of them? Maybe kind of define it a little bit. And if you're wrong, that's fine. But you know I don't care.
Looking for a specific example of one of those, or
Kind of like a definition. Like, what does theory mean to you? Or what is a method? Or what is a symbol?
I'll try method. It's like a way, or it's like a way to solve something, or like to get an answer to a theory, or to define what a symbol is, and different ways to find out or find out about something.
That's exactly right. A way to get to something. Be it a way to get to solve a crime, to win a game, to prove or disprove or support a theory or not. It's a way to get to something. To really simplify that whole idea of method, really just strip it down, it's a way to get to something, to do something.
I would say theory is like an educated guess based on the information that you have, where you think something is going to go and what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, it's a very good way to describe it. The word hypothesis is really defined as an educated guess. And when I'm going over how to write the final paper, a lot of times we'll have this discussion of what's the difference between hypothesis and theory. And there's very little difference. It's just in the semantics of it. The theory is going to come a little bit prior to the hypothesis. So the theory could be that, does anyone have a theory? Theory that the world is based on interaction. So everything that happens is based on an interaction either between individuals or groups. So it's a symbolic interaction theory. So your whole theory is the whole world socially and culturally is based on peer-to-peer interactions. So then your hypothesis is going to get a little bit more refined, and it's going to say, well, I'm going to show that's true through this being true. So it's almost like a second level educated guess. So you're right. And then when we get toward talking about hypotheses, we'll kind of distinguish the best we can, although they're very, very similar, and they go within the whole beginning of the paper. What were you going to add?
that's just what they said.
The theory thing?
Yeah.
Did you have any more to add to theory?
Not really.
It's your educated guess on how the whole world works, almost. It's sometimes called worldview.
I thought something about theory was that it's unproven.
Yeah, theory has to be unproven. I'm glad you bring that up. And I tried to mention it last week that we're not going to prove or disprove anything. Even if theory is unproven, we can't even prove it. We can only support it or negate it. We can provide evidence that it happens or that it doesn't happen. And I mean, I believe that's really what all science is. I don't think you can really prove or disprove math. You can only, sure you could do 1 trillion equations in a row and 2 + 2 always equals 4, but that only shows you that of 1 trillion times it happens. Who knows, maybe on the 1 trillionth and 1 time it can happen. I also look at criminal justice as a science as well, and I think you guys are in You get a bachelor's of science, right? It's not a bachelor's of arts. And I think what that means when you're trying to find someone guilty, it's this preponderance of evidence. You can't really ever prove, even if you have video of somebody stealing something, that's just a part of evidence. That doesn't prove anything. It's just this video shows him doing it. It doesn't prove he did it. It just shows that he did it. So, I mean, that gets very philosophical, but you're exactly right. A theory is not really proven or disproven. It can only be supported or negated. And keep that in mind when you write your papers, because we can't prove or disprove anything. And that's why it's easy for me to talk about things like abortion or homosexuality, because we'll never prove or disprove. We're not even talking about whether they're ethically or morally right or wrong. We'll just say, statistically, does this action cause this action, or does this action correlate with this action? We just try to match things up, like even with the mathematical analogy again. 2 + 2 and 4, we match those up. It's just a matching game. So we're trying to find correlations and causations. We're not trying to prove or disprove anything. And then symbols. Give me an example of a symbol. Raising your hand?
No, the fist.
The fist. I like the fist. Another one's one of these. Although this can be taken 2 ways. You guys know both ways?
Peace.
Peace and what else? Victory. Right, victory. Go ahead.
Something that represents the situation.
Yeah, and that's a good interjection, that it can represent an action, like peace, kind of like a peaceful situation, or it can represent, stop. It represents an action, and then amazingly, sign language is a whole series of linguistics and symbols that represent something else. And that's really going deep there. Is anyone here into sign language or do sign language?
I took a class in high school, but I don't
Yeah.
remember much, so.
Okay. What about, is anyone here into language? Like really get a kick out of language at all? A little bit? Like the English language or foreign languages?
Foreign language. I was Spanish major, so I like
Okay.
seeing how the differentiates and doing.
Right. Do you ever think Spanish will take over as a global language?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll ever have one unified global language, at least not for a long time.
Is it the only true universal language, or like computer language, computer code?
That's
Robots talking to each other. All right, good discussion. Now, I have to, I feel an obligation to throw out some big names anytime we're in an introduction class. So here are a few big names, and what's cool too is she, in this article, which remember, this is not your textbook, she's already thrown out some ideas and some concepts that are built into the textbook. And then I pull out these big names, and then I read the book. I read the book afterwards, and the big names are then in the first chapter. So it's no coincidence. It's this whole big ball of wax, like I was talking about last week. So Clifford Geertz, who's from the University of Chicago, which is a real powerhouse of sociology, was primarily influenced by Max Weber through Talcott Parsons. Victor Turner from Cornell was primarily influenced by Emile Durkheim. So that's a whole just long list of names that you can group together, and you don't have to know the details of them. You can pick one, read a little bit of their theory, and if you love it, you can start to study that person or that conglomerate a little bit more. But I want you to know from an introductory course, level of where we're at, these are all really some symbolic anthropologists or sociologists, really. But it all blends together in this class, as this is a sociology class. And symbolic anthropologists or symbolic sociologists. Can anyone think of a way that these folks might define their theories if they're called, just very basically, symbolic anthropologists? Like, what are some of the things that they might believe or think are true.
Or the Mayan calendar.
The Mayan calendar, which is a big group of symbols that represents what? The end of the world. When things are going to happen is all based on what letter and symbol is where. That could be one. Definitely could be one. Can anyone think of any other ones? Go ahead.
Hieroglyphics. What's that?
Yeah, and that sort of like the Mayan calendar thing, I think. I haven't studied those in depth, but I think that would be a form of linguistics. So you're both kind of grabbing onto the idea of linguistics as a series of symbols of which these guys think everything's based on. And to go from the hieroglyphics into English language now is equivalent to hieroglyphics. That's how they used to communicate with their symbols. Every syllable that's coming out of my mouth is an invisible symbol. So they would even study language, I think. I'm not sure exactly what each of them studied. I just know them as symbolic anthropologists, at least for this class. So the big ideas, I just threw out the names at you. And I'm going to pick the first one, Geertz. This is straight from the article that I read. Geertz argued that culture is not something locked inside people's heads. So now we're going to differentiate the symbolic sociologist from a different type of sociology. So he says that ideas are not, or culture and ideas, if you think culture is a set of ideas, not something locked inside people's heads. So conversely, what would it mean if you thought the whole world was based on things going on in people's heads? What sort of school might you be in? What might be your major?
Socio, or no.
Catholic school?
It could.
Psychology.
Yeah, psychology is what I was looking for. Who said Catholic school? That's a great answer. I really like that. And why would you say that? That's a great.
Like you said, it's not locked in somebody's head. So in my mind, I'm thinking you're going to school with a certain genre, purpose.
And I was, that struck me because I was actually thinking religious and biblical type stuff, which is culture not something locked inside people's heads. There's a whole variety of religions, so I'm way overgeneralizing, but a lot of religion is in people's heads. And I have my bachelor's in religion, but I can't teach you everything that I learned in 5 years right now about religion, but religion includes usually a set of practices and a set of beliefs. What are beliefs? Where are they? The wall is not really a belief, the belief of what's right and wrong is up here, right? And that's based on people's psyche. I studied a lot through psychology too. So that would be converse to what Geertz thought, perhaps. So culture is not something locked inside people's heads, but rather it's embodied in public symbols. What's a public symbol? Do you think of any types of public symbols?
You said public, I think political, but the elephant in the, I want to say.
Sure.
Donkey.
That's great. Oh, you know what? That is great. You know why? That is great. That's great. I'm glad you did that one. That'll help me. This is why it's so important to be against. This is great. So, what does the elephant and the donkey mean politically?
The Republicans, Democrats.
The Republicans and Democrats, right? So you see an elephant and a donkey, you see Republicans and Democrats. But what's deeper than that?
The donkey means ass.
No. Yeah, well, an elephant's just a bloated, overweight. So
Greater jackass or fat ass.
right, yeah. What do the political parties represent? So that's where I'm going with this.
Different ideas and views of things.
Different ideas and views on things. So if you're a Republican, you probably hate taxes, and you probably hate abortion, okay? So the elephant does not just represent, instantly I picture George Bush's face, but it also represents invading foreign countries and killing their people. It also represents closing down welfare and starving poor people. I'm way overstating this just for effect. And then the donkey represents the Democrats. But it doesn't just represent Barack Obama's face or that whole hope, whatever, or I don't know, faith, belief, whatever the thing is underneath his face. What else does it represent? The Democrat donkey. You just keep going deeper. What sort of things do the Democrats believe in?
Government taking over everything.
Yes, socialism, right?
Taking away guns.
The symbols, is the elephant the Democrat? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Yes, you just looked it up.
I thought you had it backwards, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. I don't know. It has it both on here.
They're messing with you. Wikipedia, they just changed it up for this. In fact, I changed it before class just to mess with me. But on a deeper level, the Republicans stand for something, so the symbol represents something much deeper than just even a person or a group of people. It actually goes all the way from the party to the people, all the way up into their heads, all based on the symbol. So maybe Geertz was right, because if you have religious scholars or psychological scholars that just limit it here, Geertz says, hey, we're going to throw it all on symbols, which, by the way, cover religious, the cross, or cover the psychological. You just go to that deeper level. So maybe Geertz is right. As I stated earlier, this is a way to communicate a worldview. And that was why that was so great, too, that whole political thing. People's worldviews are usually exemplified in their political stance and statements. I'm thinking a lot about apathetic political stance too. So some people are gung-ho Republicans, they're kind of over the top, and they are far rightists or Tea Parties. Some people are just bleeding heart liberals, they're way over the top, and they've been intense in the Occupy Wall Street for a year or whatever. But then there are also people who could care less, and it's this apathetic group of America, which is communicating the worldview of apathy, which is also present in our country. But a worldview is just really what it says. I had philosophy classes where we tried to define worldview, but it's pretty simple. It's really how you view the world. Not only how you view politics, ethics, morals, religion, success, happiness. I was thinking about this over the week, getting ready for this class. If you wanted to write a paper on happiness, you could do that. You could really pick anything. Happiness is a fun thing to study. So symbols communicate the worldview and value orientations, like we talked about, whether we think killing is good or bad, or war is good or bad, ethos, and all the rest. It's a way of communicating between each other and to future generations. And that's, we have to remember as anthropologists, we're a little bit more historical than the sociologists. At least that's my opinion. So more examples of symbols in the socio-cultural realm is you have status symbols, and I put the shoes up here because didn't we talk about shoes last week? In fact, I got new shoes this week.
Are you Jordan?
No, I had to get dress shoes. You see what you miss in the first 5 minutes of class. I already talked about. I am just a tool in the system, and I have to buy dress shoes. And I used to wear flip-flops, but I can't because people think I'm crazy if I wore flip-flops. You would all think I was cool, but the people that saw my picture in me in a suit and flip-flops, they would think I'm crazy because that's counterculture. So the shoes, same thing can be said with the shoes. If I wore Jordans or if I wore Converse All-Stars, people will look at me as sort of a counterculture. I'm going against the norm. That's something you should have learned in Intro to Sociology, is this whole idea, if I'm not doing something that I'm supposed to do, which right now I'm doing something right now, I'm supposed to stay in here, give you a PowerPoint, buy new shoes, wear a tie, cut my hair, and reasonably keep my facial hair okay. So I'm really abiding by cultural rules and norms. But status symbol of shoes in a different group, we talked about this last week. If I wore shoes right now, I'm outside the norm. But if I wear some sweet Jordans in a high school, all of a sudden I'm top of the prestige ladder. So it's a total flip-flop. It's kind of strange. So that being said, status symbols, these types of symbols, this thing can remain the same, but the way it communicates a worldview is going to be totally different if I was wearing them or if a high school kid was wearing them. It's the same symbol, completely different communication of values. Okay? Religious symbols. I already brought up the cross. I think we can all get an idea of what that means. Just a really quick anecdote about that, though. Does anyone know the difference of Protestant jewelry crosses and Catholic jewelry crosses? Does anyone know the difference there? It's something you can Google. I know which is which. One of them, I think it's the Catholic one, has Jesus on it, on their jewelry. And then the other one, I think it's Protestant, does not, they do not put the Jesus on there. So the cross, even though it's the same Christian religion, is going to have serve different meanings to a certain sect
Like this?
population.
You got it right.
You have Jesus or no Jesus? Does that represent anything to you? Or is it like Nikes to you? Which it totally can be, right? It's like Nikes. And that's totally fine. I'll prefer that you be honest. So
No, I said a little bit more than that.
it's more than Nikes.
Yes.
Do you go to church?
Yeah.
Is your attendance at church a symbol? Think about that.
Isn't it?
I don't consider it being, because just because I don't go to church like regularly every Sunday doesn't mean I don't have the same beliefs or faith as somebody that goes every Sunday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday does.
What's a symbol, though? It's a way of communicating your worldview. So if you appear in the physical form in your church, does that communicate something about your worldview to other?
Isn't it something? The
Yeah.
fact that you're there?
Yeah.
The fact that you're supposed to be like this high and mighty Christian, when in fact some Christians only go because that's what they want people to think.
They want that symbol.
So this is a great discussion because, you know why this is such a great discussion? Because somebody could go there with the purest intentions, and somebody else could look at them and go, they're just trying to show off and sit down, you know? So an action, a symbol of present attendance can be interpreted in different ways. So that's how you might debunk Geertz's whole idea of, oh, you think symbols are so great. Well, this guy wears a symbol of a cross, and you think it's because he loves religion, but actually he's like a Satan worshiper. So you totally interpreted that wrong. The person that goes to church, you think it's because they're trying to show off, but really they're super pious. They really have great intention. So symbols, just like the Jordans, just like the crosses, can be taken completely opposite. And a little bit of irony, the donkey and elephant could have been completely opposite that we just totally discussed. All right? And I'm not trying to play tricks on you, but maybe I totally put Geertz's name in the wrong spot and it was supposed to be another person's name. This whole symbol of my PowerPoint can convey completely bogus information.
That's why we don't take tests.
That's right. That's right. That's deep. Try your paper on it. Other symbols, legal symbols, and maybe your criminal justice guys would like the stop signs, and other don't do it signs. And then I did put this on here, not to stir controversy, but this is a sign, a symbol, which seems to really clearly convey what this person wants and what their worldview is. And so sometimes you have very ambiguous symbols. What does this mean? You got to think about who's putting them on. Oh, what does that mean to a high schooler? What would that mean if a priest wore Jordans in his class? You know, you get this conversation about how symbols can be different. And then you look at something like this, and if you can't see it in the back, it says, we want white tenants in our white community. So this is some racist dude. There's very little debate about what their intention on that symbol of a sign was.
I got a serious question here.
Yeah.
Are those Wu-Tang themed Nikes?
Can anyone answer that?
Looks like the Wu-Tang Clan symbol.
It is a very small Wu-Tang Clan symbol. Very good. I didn't know that when I put this on here. There's a Google image. Nikes or something. But yeah, these are Wu-Tang. How about that? Killer Bee version of that. I know Wu-Tang shit.
Yeah.
They opened up the Rage Against the Machine, my favorite thing. At the Palace. Scary thing. I was in the second deck. I see this girl come out with a wishbone. She just wings it off into the crowd. Oh, that was a pretty emphatic symbol. Rage Against the Machine fans are really a lot of anarchists. Most, I mean, not most of them, but a lot. Not necessarily my worldview, but that could be taken wrong with the symbol of me wearing a Rage shirt. But it would have been hers with the whole broom. Okay, cultural ecology. That goes with our socio-cultural first category. General evolution. The evolution of culture in general in terms of stages of social complexity. So you might think that when man first kind of crawled out of his cave and went from caveman to man, or was Adam in a highly civilized way, whichever way you believe the world transformed. The anthropologist tends to believe that there are stages of social complexity, and that's hard to debate because we can even talk about stages of social complexity from the 1950s until today. One of those just being social networks. So we all have these friends. We can talk about Facebook friends, real friends, face-to-face friends, fake Facebook friends, whatever. This whole friendship idea. So the stages of our social complexity of where we might have been a tribe in 1900, or a town or a township in the 1930s, and now we're just a group of Facebook friends. So these are stages of social complexity. And also combined directly to that, maybe or maybe not, in my example, is technological advancement. So the whole idea here from a social and anthropological point of view is evolution. You can have biological evolution, and maybe you want to study that, the biophysical anthropology. But you can also have social evolution. So it's this whole idea that you got to start thinking about, like, the survival of the fittest is actually a social evolutionary concept, believe it or not. And in fact, I think it might have been invented by Geertz, not Darwin. You can Google that on the break. But it's true that survival of the fittest is not necessarily, it has nothing to do with who's stronger. It's who can fit into the social group the best is going to continue and sustain. So it's a whole, just flipped your whole worldview almost. And evolution is social evolution, at least in this class. So how do we study this stuff? Back to the original first or second slide. The idea of practice, or praxis, or action, activity. It's doing the anthropology. Get on the ground, do field work. Itself is further contribute to such thinking, the type of thinking that we do in this class, based on this paradoxical injunction to participate and observe. That's what we have to do in this class. We don't go to a library and look stuff up, or necessarily find answers through Google, which may or may not be right. Probably right most of the time. But we have to participate and observe. So, to get to this Democrat, donkey and elephant thing. So in this class, I don't think that looking in a book is going to teach us anything. I think that participation and observation is going to teach us really what's going on in the world. So if I wanted to truly find out what party was the donkey and what was the elephant, what would I do?
Go find out for yourself, not looking. You can go participate and observe in political events.
Exactly. I'd go to the Democratic National Convention tonight, and I would look at all their buttons and T-shirt, and I would start marking them. Donkey, elephant. That would throw me off if there's an elephant. So that really, keep that idea in mind for this class. You're not going to go look something up in the book to answer your question. You're going to go to wherever you need to go. And you're going to start making 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, donkey. You're going to remember that from tonight. Go home. Girdwood, what I learned tonight? Donkey. Observe where and when you live, and the world is our laboratory. And I think that was the last one, but I was wrong. But we'll take the break. We'll call it good, and we'll come back. So carve up, get what you need to get, participate and observe what you have to participate and observe. Get ready for the second hour. But, like I said, I'm not going to steal any of the thunder away from the second hour presenters, because my slideshow is not about the book. You see that very quickly, I believe, in the first slide. How did I find the source for my presentation, my slides today? I got into the book, which I went online to Google Books. I got it for free. And then I went to the very end of chapter 1. And at the end of each chapter is going to be a bibliography or a list of the sources for that chapter. So I'm trying to give you tips on how to read stuff too as we go along. This is an intro course. I'm going to teach you these tips that will help you later on in other classes. There's another knock against me. They said, get ready. They said, this is not an English course. I thought I was taking sociology as an English course. But you have to learn other skills and abilities than just sociology, I think, in this class. And that's my philosophy, so I'm just conveying all my philosophies in the first 2 weeks. And I think writing is a real important skill. I work with people that can't form sentences, and it drives me insane, and it bugs the heck out of me. Granted, some of those people wind up being very successful, so whether or not that determines your success level in life, that's, to be debated in another class at another time. But I think it's really important to learn. And you can't get published, for example, as a sociologist unless you know how to write. I mean, it's just part of the deal. So I also want to teach you how to read. And instead of just going into a chapter and reading every word, you should skim it. And one of the first things you should do is just read the section headings and skip to the end and look at the source list. Or if you're a writer or something like that. If you're interested in history, mostly, maybe you want, history, you might want to look at archaeology. That's my least favorite, although I like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. If you're a medical, pre-med student, or nursing student, or health sciences, you might want to look at biological and physical or anthropology. If you're like me and you like social stuff, you might want to choose to go socio-cultural route. And these are just our 4 categories of anthropology, as broad as we can get them, what we learned last week. So you want to start getting that footing and that foundation as we move forward. As I've indicated, every class is really important to come to and just kind of plow forward. And if you miss one, it's hard to go back and really make that up. It's all about the engagement. And I really like this 3-hour structure now, where it's going to be the slides, and you guys, and then the discussion. The discussion is really loose. I have a couple ideas for discussion tonight that I'm kind of excited about. But what's the guy who's not here today? He must be sick, and so he'll get well soon. But what's his name? Oh, it's 2 of them.
The one that were brothers?
Yeah. They're both gone. Nobody knows their name. Oh, I
They're
remember.
coming in right now.
Jay Streeter was one of them. I think Jay Streeter.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
Well, he did, I think it was him, brought up the fact that I was on Rate the Professor. So you know me, I had to go home and check it out. As soon as class, in fact, maybe not even when class was over, I probably did it right here on my phone. And one of the knocks was that I came up with stuff they thought the day of class. And I thought about that and like, is that a bad thing to really live in the moment of today, or what's important today? What's going in today or this month or this year? What's super important right now are the presidential elections. And so obviously that will come to the top, rise to the top as something that's vital to our lives today. It's very current. So, obviously that student was wrong to knock me, obviously, first off. But second off, I mean, I'm going to keep living in today, and I hope that doesn't bother any of you. I actually did make the PowerPoint on Sunday, but if you want me to just go back to my last year's PowerPoints and kind of use those, I'll do that. It saved me a lot of time. I like to keep things fresh. So even to the fact where I was reading chapter 1 out in the hall, just to get all fresh on it, and stuff starts popping in my head. So I encourage you to do that. For those of you who are new to college, and I don't think many in this class are really new, but don't worry about reading all week and really stewing on this stuff. I would encourage you to read the day after class and then right before class, just so that when you get to class, you're just kind of geared up and ready to engage. So you don't have to worry about a ton of reading. Just come ready to engage, okay? So those are our 4 categories again, and the rest of the stuff is for the 3rd hour, and I don't want to steal any thunder away from our wonderful presenters in the 2nd hour. This is the slideshow, which I already posted on my website, so you can find it there as well. The title of the slideshow is Disorientation and Orientation. All right, let's do this, and plan to get our first break by 10 to 8 so you can get carved up. First, I want to do a real quick refresher of what we learned last week, which is on the website as slides, podcast, and video. And if you actually click the play button, you'll get the audio. I won't do it right now, but you can do it that way. And it loads well on your mobile phone, or you can do the podcast or YouTube. But one thing you can take from the slides are 4 categories of anthropology, which I've put on the board. Just trying to tattoo those into your brain, no pun intended. Tattoo guys are missing today. Sociocultural anthropology, linguistics, archaeology, and the biological physical anthropology. Those are 4 categories. You want to start thinking about those and what interests you most. I wrote them in that order because it just slab or slap was sticking out to me as some way you can remember those. Or if you go with cultural, then you can do clap as well. But you just pick one as you move forward and try to decide what your final project paper topic is. If you're an English major or something, if you love language, or if you are a international studies major, or sometimes maybe like international business or marketing, global studies. You might want to look at linguistics. Your final project's going to require 6 sources. In fact, your midterm requires 6 sources. And so what you want to do right now is anytime something piques your interest and you get a little titillated about the subject matter, look to the back of the chapter and look at the list of sources. And you start doing what I call cherry picking. Just cherry pick sources. So the fact is you don't really have to get super good at searching the journal indexes. I mean, you do have to find them eventually, acquire them and look at them. But you don't have to be like this genius database indexing searcher. Just kind of go along and cherry pick sources. And when I got to the end of the chapter 1, I came across this one, Investigating Culture, an Experimental Introduction to Anthropology. Oh wait, that's the book. No. That's the book. That's how I picked the book too, the same way actually. And it's a good book. But that's not the article that I reviewed for this slideshow. But I went to the back of the book and I went to the sources and I picked Theory in Anthropology since the 60s, Comparative Studies in Society and History. And I thought that was cool because it's the 60s and I like Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and 1968 Detroit Tigers, Major League Baseball world champions, et cetera, et cetera. In the 60s, kind of, I'm a little bit of a hippie at heart. I would probably have long hair if it was allowed in this American culture and acceptable in the business. I would probably have tie-dye or something, maybe some Birkenstocks. Oh, in fact, last year I wore suits with sand